A group of high school students started a project to research a string of unsolved murders.
There is no profile of this killer except for the ones the students created.
What if this guy's still alive? Like, what if he comes after us?
Once you start getting a few tips or a few leads or a few identifications, then the cold case isn't so cold anymore.
This is Murder 101. Listen to Murder 101 on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's Kate
and Oliver
Hudson,
host of the new podcast, Sibling Revelry. That's right.
We started this show because, you know what? No one talks about siblings and that dynamic.
The siblings, they know each other better than anybody.
Yes.
You know.
Listen to Sibling Revelry on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Episode 77, Money Myths That Are Holding You Back with Rob Berger.
Welcome to the Frugal Friends podcast, where you'll learn to save money, embrace simplicity, and live a richer life. Here are your hosts, Jen and Jill.
Welcome back to another regular episode of the Frugal Friends podcast.
It's never
I'm
regular.
Jen.
I'm Jill.
And we are stoked to have another guest with us today. We've got Rob Berger, who is the deputy editor of personal finance at Forbes, the Forbes.
You know the one.
Yes, the creator of doughroller.net and author of the book we're talking about today, Retire Before Mom and Dad. There is almost nothing this dude hasn't done, and he's still so nice and humble. He's so great.
Yeah, I think this is a longer episode because it was such a good interview, such rich dialogue, at least in my estimation, that I really think you're going to want to listen all the way through.
Yeah.
Definitely listen all the way through.
No rambling.
We don't scream.
Just really, really great stuff. We talk about screaming, but we don't scream.
Don't scream. We yell a little bit, so don't fall asleep.
Yeah. So this was a fantastic interview. Definitely listen all the way to the end. And you're going to love Rob just as much as we did. So let's get into
Guaranteed.
Thank you so much, Rob, for coming on the Frugal Friends podcast. It's so good to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about being on your show.
Yeah, we are excited to dive in and hear your take on all things money, all of it.
Yes.
So we're curious, Rob, can you tell our listeners and us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to write your book?
Sure. It was kind of 20 years in the making, but I won't go through the whole thing. So I kind of had an epiphany about money.
Yeah, let's go for it. Yeah.
We got time? Okay. So I was born a little over 50 years ago. Yeah. So when I started out of college and working, I was very sort of typical in the sense that, you make some money, you spend a lot of it, and you try to save a little bit. And I didn't really give it much thought. And had an epiphany along the way. This would have been around early 2000s that said, all this stuff that I'm buying, it's not really making me happy. And I need to change that. And so I made some big changes in my life, happy to go into the details. But that then led me to wanting to get out of debt. And I've even got a piece of paper here with me that I wrote out in 2005 that said I'd be totally debt-free in 7 years. Didn't quite make that deadline, but eventually did. Anyway, that led me to start blogging at Doughroller in 2007. And then that turned into a podcast in 2013. I've since sold all of that, but out of that grew the book. And I wrote the book for two reasons. Because of the blogging and the podcasting, people love to tell me about their money, friends, family. I mean, I know how much money they have in the bank, how much they make. It kind of gets weird after a while.
People just feel like they can tell you things.
Well, that, and I have to remember what I'm not allowed to repeat to whom. It's like I've got all this information in my head that can't go anywhere.
Oh my goodness.
But in talking to them, I realized that people had some basic questions they were struggling with, right? How do you get out of debt? How do you start investing? What's a mutual fund? How do you build wealth? So that was the first thing. I wanted to write a book that kind of gave people a plan of action. Here's how you should think about building wealth, and here's how to do it. That was the first reason I wrote the book. The second one was, and I think this started around the Great Recession, 08, 09. There's this feeling that the American dream is, if it's not dead, it's really wounded and not available to a lot of people. Sure, if you're born in the 1% or whatever, you've got a trust fund, you win the lottery, you found Facebook, you're fine. But for everyone else, it's going to be a struggle, and you're likely not going to participate in the American dream. And while I acknowledge we have challenges, I really don't believe that. I think there's a lot more hope for us. And I think we have a lot more power over our financial future. And so I wanted to write a book that kind of gave people some hope and a plan of action. So that's why I wrote the book.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you mentioned some big changes that you made that you are fine going into. Care to share any of the heavy hitters?
So I went to undergrad. It's where my wife and I met, and then I went to law school, and I graduated in '92 with a truckload of debt. So as bad as student loans are now, they were a thing in the 1990s.
We'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I mean, in today's dollars, and my wife had some too from graduate school. We probably had in today's dollars $150,000, I'd say, in debt.
Yeah.
And I went to work at a law firm. And in the world of law firms, you sort of work for 8 years as an associate. And if you work hard and do all the right things, you make partner. And that's sort of the holy grail. That's the thing everyone wants to achieve. And I wanted that. And sure enough, after 8 years, I made partner. And I was not happy. It's like I had this goal for so long, and I achieved it. And it was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. This is not what I thought it would be. And at first, I didn't leave the firm. I just started buying things with this newfound money, stuff that I thought, okay, law firm life isn't really what I wanted, but maybe a fancy watch will do it. That took about 2 years for me to realize, that ain't going to cut it either. So I left the law firm, took a massive pay cut, sold almost all of the stuff that I had bought, and kind of did a reset. And that kind of led me to the point where, it's not the stuff that's going to make me happy. Some stuff in life is good, but going after it like that, the law firm, the partnership didn't make me happy. All the stuff it could buy me didn't make me happy. I want something more out of life. And so I kind of did a reset and started focus on getting out of debt. And that kind of gets me into that 2005 period. I was actually listening to Dave Ramsey. And I'm not really, I've never read any of his books. I don't really listen to him on a regular basis. But I was listening to him. It was June of 2005. And you know how if you've ever listened to a show, people come on and they scream they're debt free. And I thought, that's what I want. That's what I want. I don't know that I want to go on a show and scream I'm debt free.
Right.
Maybe I'll scream on your show.
Yeah.
So I thought, that's more appealing to me.
That's awesome. Yeah. I listened to Dave Ramsey when we were paying off debt, and I never went on and screamed there. I screamed in my house. But not. I didn't feel like I needed to spend the money to go to Nashville to scream.
Right.
But you could scream at home. Why?
You can scream
why
now,
do that?
It's free to scream at home.
Free to scream at home.
Rob, I also love that you said your goal was to pay off your debt in 7 years, and that you didn't actually make that. And 7 years is a long time too. Like, people set these goals to pay off their debt in like 2 and 3 years and get so bummed when they don't make it.
Yeah.
But I love your story there.
Well, and mathematically, when I set that goal, I couldn't make the numbers add up. When I kind of tried to put it in a spreadsheet, it just wasn't going to add up. But I wanted, in some ways, setting a goal that is not possible as things stand now, right? It forces you or compels you to start thinking outside the box. At least it did for me.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And the path I ended up taking, I could have never predicted. And again, I didn't actually become debt-free in 7 years. It took me another, I think, 4 years. So it was like 11 years it took me.
Wow.
But that's okay. Right? It was like failure had never felt so good, right? I'll fail that way every day.
Yeah, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going off script here. Not that there's much of a script. So to your comfort and knowledge level, don't be nervous. It's not going to get weird. But it's interesting what you're describing. So my background is in social work, and we talk a lot about the psychology of humanity and people who tend to thrive despite difficult circumstances versus those who don't or just survive. And this concept of external locus of control versus internal locus of control. And those who think that they don't have power over things and things just happen to them and they have no ability to course correct tend to do worse in life. That's, just like a quick summary. But it's interesting. It sounds like from what you're describing, even going back to the very beginning when we first started talking, of saying that you think a lot more people have power over their money than they think, which to me, like, that got me thinking about, well, yeah, that's connected to where we think the control comes from. So with that thought in mind, Rob, what do you think it would take for somebody, even not making a ton of money, to be able to move towards that mentality of, I am able to do more with my money than I think?
That is a great question. And I won't pretend that I have the perfect answer to it, but I do think there are some elements that go into it. One is knowledge, right? So as an example, when I talk to folks, I talk to a lot of people that have just graduated from high school or college, and I'll ask them, so what do you think it would take to be a millionaire, right? And, they're making 30 grand a year, 40 grand, they're not making six figures. And
sure,
they kind of give me that look like, I don't even know what world you're in right now because this is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give them like a hypothetical. I'll say, well, let's imagine you make 50 grand.
Mm-hmm.
And let's imagine you never, ever get a raise. You're going to make 50 grand until you retire in your late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, you can only save 5%. You're not allowed to save anymore. That's comes out to about $208 a month.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that, how much will you have when you retire if you earn an average return? And the answers I get usually range between $100,000 and $500,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I tell them, no, it's actually 1.7 million, it's like this light goes off in their mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't compounding, we all know what it is. But when you actually put the numbers in and let them run for 10, 20, 30 years, they end up compounding in a way that I don't think our minds, at least mine certainly doesn't, that we don't naturally grasp, right? And so I think, again, this isn't a complete answer to your question, but I think once we realize the power of every dollar that comes into our hand, we have to spend some of it for sure, right?
Sure.
But when we understand that power, even relatively small amounts invested over time, at least for some folks, it empowers them. So, I didn't realize that. So that's maybe part of the answer. I don't think it's a complete answer because I talk to other folks and I won't mention my son or daughter. I won't say it's them.
Don't say their names.
I won't say, but they've heard me, they're so sick of this stuff, right? So they have the knowledge. I'm not sure it always translates though into, as you described it, having this sort of worldview that you have more control over your life than you may think you do. So there's another piece to it that's maybe just pure psychological that I don't know that I've fully figured out.
Sure.
I think some people, I don't know if it's their upbringing, nature, all those things, they're just the kind of people that, they're not going to give up and they're just going to keep moving towards their goal. And when they have a setback, they're going to pick themselves up, brush themselves off and keep moving towards that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And other people just don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you guys have any answer to that question?
I love what you're saying about the knowledge piece, though. I think that even having an understanding that there are two ways of approaching the world and understanding how and why things happen, at least in this sense, right? If we're talking internal versus external, that can help. So I love that you mentioned knowledge and just beginning to attribute the fact that your dollar does have power. I think we too quickly give up and say, I'm only making $30,000 a year, so this is my lot in life, and I'm only ever going to be working this job or whatever the case is. But to start to kind of pull back from that that and gain perspective, which I think comes from community. So reading your book, listening to this podcast, that's it. Stop there. No, but continuing to engage with these types of things and people in the community and gaining more perspective, I think can help than just kind of nose in the sand thinking nothing's ever going to change.
Yeah. And I suppose part of it too might be who you surround yourself with, right? If you want to become someone who, just keeps moving towards the goal, even in difficult circumstances, surround yourself with people who are like that.
Yeah.
I think that could help.
Good word. Thanks for going off script with me.
Yes. I also liked what you said earlier about having to think outside the box in order to reach your goals. And I think in addition to knowledge, I think the resourcefulness that comes with having to think differently about your situation or get creative, think outside the box. I think that's another thing that can really help people take control.
Well, and that's actually a big part of what I write about in the book. And I call it asking what if questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they can be small, like, the whole latte factor thing. Some people love it, some people hate it. But, what if you give up a latte, right? Okay, that's pretty small. What if you give up cable TV? All right, now we're getting serious, right? You're messing with cable, or God forbid, the Netflix subscription. And by the way, I have a Netflix subscription, so I'm not suggesting everyone go out and cancel. But you can start to ask more serious what if questions, like what if I don't have a car? And I think if folks are like me, I immediately have an objection to that. It's like, well, how am I going to get to work? How am I going to get the kids to their soccer games? How can I go without a car? But if you start to ask those questions, it forces you to think outside the box. You may at the end say, you know what? After thinking about it, I'm still going to drink my latte. I'm still going to have cable. I'm still going to have a car. Then again, maybe you won't, right? I mean, maybe some things will change. And when my wife and I moved to Washington, D.C., we got an apartment and I could walk to the metro and I could be to work in 25 minutes downtown D.C. And a year after we were there, we did what I think so many families do. We moved out to the suburbs. Why? Well, houses are cheaper. None of them are cheap here, but cheaper. And that's what people do. And we got 2 cars. Why? Because that's what people do. And I commuted an hour and a half each way to work. Why? Because that's what we do here. I wasn't thinking at all outside the box. I wasn't asking what if questions. And I look back on that time and I think, man, I was an idiot. Now, if I'd asked those questions, maybe we would have done the same thing, but I kind of doubt it. And by the way, I don't have a car today, although my wife does. So she lets me drive hers.
Oh, so kind.
Yeah.
Nice woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you ask yourself so many what if questions, you may not change, you probably won't change everything, but you're bound to change at least one thing. And that's the goal, is just to make incremental changes.
Yeah. And you can run experiments, right? Park your car for 3 weeks or go without a latte for 3. I mean, I use the latte example in part because there was a time when I had a mocha almost 7 days a week for years.
Good for you.
And I stopped more for health reasons. I know a mocha is great, right? But I stopped more for health reasons than financial reasons. But I was miserable for a couple of weeks. That's all I could think about was the stupid mocha. And then after a while, you stop thinking about it. You don't even miss it. And if I had one today, I'd get sick to my stomach.
The mocha factor.
Well, it's like we think we know what makes us happy.
Yeah.
We have routines in life, habits, and I can't give up that. I can't give up this. Like, I want to live life, right? I want to live life to the fullest. And this is what it looks like for me. At least in my case, I've come to believe that half the time I don't have a clue what makes me happy. I'm just
that's so honest. I love it.
It's so true.
I mean, seriously.
We think we know, and then we do that thing, and we're still miserable.
Right. Or we give up something, and it's actually not so bad not having it.
Right.
Yeah. And these things you think you just cannot give up, but then you give them up, and you're like, oh, I really thought I was going to be more bent out of shape about that than I was. But you don't know until you try.
And you might even find that you're happier without it.
Yeah.
At least in my case, I'm not pounding down a mocha every day.
Yeah. It leads to brainstorming. It leads to creativity. And I think it leads to even the steps. When you ask those even bigger what if questions, it might not be that you could actually do that thing, but it starts to make you think, well, so what would the steps be to get there? And could I incrementally make some changes that are somewhat in that direction? It's a fantastic, across the board, not just with finances. It's a fantastic, even therapeutic tool.
Yes. We know New Year's resolutions often don't stick. In fact, on average, they last around 30 days. So if saving money is on your 2024 resolution list, here's a foolproof way to stick to yours.
Switch your phone provider to Mint Mobile. For a limited time, wireless plans from Mint Mobile are $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. That's unlimited talk, text, and data for $15 a month.
For those of you paying close to $40 a month for just one phone line, this means a savings of $300 over the course of the year. We especially like Mint because all plans come with unlimited talk and text and high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/frugal. That's mintmobile.com/frugal. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/frugal. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So, buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So, how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/strategic. That's oracle.com/strategic. oracle.com/strategic.
So we invited you onto the show, Rob, actually, to talk about these 5 money myths that you've noticed that tend to keep people back from finding this financial freedom, this control over their finances. And after reading a lot of your book, I just felt like these 5 myths really do encompass a lot of the negative money mindset that a lot of the middle class holds on to. I know that I, for so long, held on to these and just it made me feel like I couldn't get ahead. I'd never become a millionaire or even financially secure. So I would love to just go through these for our listeners. The first one is that financial freedom requires a big salary. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is the one that I hear a lot where people just say, I don't have the money to save. And of course, in some cases, people might not have the money to save, right? Depending on their circumstances. So, I recognize everyone's situation is different. But when I started to talk to people about this, and I kind of dive a little deeper, if they're letting me and they're asking for my input, I come to learn that they actually have a lot more ability to build wealth on their income than they realize. And, I kind of ran through a quick example earlier, but in the book, the example I use is someone, again, making $50,000 a year, never getting a raise, and saving 10%. So, and I get not everyone's there yet, but certainly I don't think we'd say that 10% is a crazy goal, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you're saving $5,000 a year in this example. And if you did that during your traditional working years, say from out of college to when you can get full Social Security in your mid to late 60s, you've worked for 45 years. How much have you saved? Well, you've saved $225,000, right? And we haven't even thought about inflation yet, right? Mm. So that's what you've actually saved from working. If you stuck it under your mattress, you'd have a very lumpy bed and $225,000 stuck under there, right? If instead you invested it, and here I'm thinking mainly passive index funds, and happy to get into all the detail you want there, and you earned an average return on that money during that period, you'd have just under $3.5 million. Mm. Now, I'm guessing most people in following this hypothetical through would have not guessed that kind of money. Remember, it was 1.7 earlier, but we were only saving 5%.
Right.
And the thing I'd like to point out to people is, look, the vast majority of your wealth doesn't come from the actual dollars you save. You need to do that to get the ball rolling. But 80, 90% of your wealth 20, 30, 40 years from now is going to come from your investment returns and the compounding of your investment returns. And that is a really important concept to understand. And when you understand that kind of power, then you can see that even on a quote unquote smaller salary, or say something that's not six figures, right, or whatever, you can still build a lot of wealth. Now, of course, there's the whole issue of, well, how do you save 5% or how do you save 10% or goodness, how do you save 20%? And I cover that as well. But the important thing to understand is every dollar that comes into your hand, it has the potential to be a tremendous builder of wealth for you. Kind of related to that is small changes. I kind of ran through those assumptions quickly. You save $5,000 a year for, in this case, 45 years, you earn an average rate of return. I kind of gloss by those, but those are actually really important inputs. If you change it from $5,000 a year to $4,500, it's $500 a year, not a huge amount of money. It makes a tremendous difference to the outcome.
Yeah.
Small changes in the return or the amount you save over time turn into either piles of wealth or missed opportunities and lost wealth. For some, that's a little disconcerting, but I find it empowering.
Yeah, over time is the key, but also staying content in the interim. That's great to say 45 years from now, you've got $3 million. But staying content with, living off of the $45,000 a year in the hypothetical situation and continuing to keep that consistency. I think that's a big key also, which I think is connected to another one of your lies. So,
and in the 45 years, probably many people listening to the show weren't born 45 years ago.
Right.
Carter.
Yeah.
Carter was president, I think. So, I don't want to gloss over that that's a long time, but maybe that actually gets to lie number 2.
Yeah. Which financial freedom takes 40 years or longer to achieve. Yeah. Tell us about that myth.
Yeah. So, in the hypothetical, we're looking at a long time frame, but there are two things about it. One is you can shorten that significantly by increasing your savings. And of course the whole FIRE movement, right? Financial independence, retire early. But you don't have to increase it as much as you think. I talk to people and they I can't do FIRE. Who can save 70% of their income?
Right.
Mr. Money Mustache is insane. And
did you listen to our episode on that? Is that what you're saying?
No. Well, my first response to that is, yeah, he is kind of insane. And by the way, I've known Pete for a long time. He was on my show, 6 years ago, I think.
Oh, nice.
But most people aren't going to do that. Most people aren't going to save 50%, right? There was a time when I did, but most of the time I didn't. But, even saving 20%, still a big saving rate. I get it, but not, Mr. Money Mustache crazy, right?
Sure.
Shortens the time to reach financial independence significantly. But here's the other thing I'd say. I think people start to experience the benefits of financial freedom even when they get to what I call level 1, which is just 1 month's worth of expenses in the bank. Because you've taken the burden off of living paycheck to paycheck. Sure, you don't have a long runway, you're just starting out, that's fine. But you're not living paycheck to paycheck. And when you get to the point where you've got 6 months saved and invested or a year saved and invested, and you keep moving from there, it can have a profound impact on your life. Yeah. And one story I share, when I left the law firm, took a huge pay cut, went to work at a corporation, and the job was okay. Didn't really work out. I ended up leaving after a couple of years. I wouldn't call it a failure, but it was clear that it was not a long-term thing. And I was in a meeting with some higher ups, and one of the top people there was screaming and yelling at a coworker, totally out of line. And I remember thinking then, I can't retire. I don't have that kind of financial freedom, but I got plenty of money in the bank. I'm working towards it. And you know what? I could quit this job. I could walk out of this meeting right now and go out the front door. And I might be unemployed for 6 months, but I got the freedom to do that. I don't have to take this crap, right? And this wasn't even directed at me. I just, anyway. And in fact, I did. I ended up waiting to get another job, but I left that job just a couple of months later. But that kind of freedom, you're not trapped.
Yeah.
I mean, emotionally, it's huge.
I think we focus so much on the end goal of financial freedom that we forget about all of the cognitive load and the weight that's lifted off with every step closer you get. And it's so living paycheck to paycheck is so stressful. It affects our decisions and our mental energy so much. And every step you take to get closer to that takes that burden off and is in its own freedom. And I love that.
Absolutely.
And it depends on even your definition of retirement. I think people try to get so creative with that. And I get it, because when you retire, you're still going to do something with your time. And there's times where I'm like, yeah, I'm retired. Like, no, I'm not. I do still have to work. But I do have the freedom to choose a job that I enjoy. So that's part of it, is that I think so much of the FIRE movement is wanting to get out of something, quote unquote, dead end. And of course, if it feels that way, that's really a bummer to be stuck in that. But to be able to work something, because we're always going to want to do something with our hands, to put our minds and our energy to something, but to be able to have that freedom to say, yeah, I can leave this job. I've got enough money saved. I can go choose to do something that I want, or I can choose to do something that is less money because I've cut my expenses and I'm able to do that. So much freedom in what we can do and how we achieve that freedom.
It's funny you say that, because when I left that, so I'd taken a massive pay cut to take that job. And I went from the big corner office at the law firm to this, I think it was a converted closet. But at least it was an office. I had that going for me.
It had a door,
so
it had walls.
Yeah. I mean, there is an ego part of this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have to give credit to my wife. She didn't give a rip about that stuff. She could care less if I were a partner at a big firm or I had a closet for an office. She really, I picked a winner. But the point is, when I left that job, I took another pay cut, right? I was like, I'm working backwards. Yeah, in a way, I was climbing down the corporate ladder, right? And in part because I'd realized I'd leaned the ladder against the wrong building, right?
I like
climbing,
that.
I was climbing. Yeah. I was climbing fast. I was just going to the wrong place. And that third job was the best job ever. It was wonderful. And I couldn't have done it had I continued to try to live a partner lifestyle.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That kind of brings us to our next lie. Everyone says money can't buy happiness, but those of us that live in the real world really think that happiness is expensive. And that is a true myth that we believe.
Yeah, that's my view. When I talk to people about this, a lot of them will say, Rob, I hear you, but listen, life is short. I might be dead before I can retire. I want to live life for today. And I say, well, so do I. So what does that look like? And are the things that you're doing, particularly when it comes to spending money, truly making you happy, right? Maybe they are. But what I've found is that the things that make me the happiest don't generally involve spending a lot of money. I mean, yes, we all like to go on a nice vacation. We like to maybe, buy some nice things for our children or our significant other. And what that means in terms of actual dollars is going to vary from person to person. But what I have found in my own experience was that when I bought things that were expensive to me, they ended up not bringing me the happiness that I thought they would. And, we've lived a very comfortable lifestyle, but I mean, most of the day-to-day stuff that we do either costs nothing or very little.
Yeah.
I'm not not to keep bringing Miss Pete into this, but, he lives on like 24 grand a year or something. That's not me. I'm not sort of that. Yeah. But that's okay. Everyone's got a different thing, but, I'm not someone that's got to have a new car every other year.
Yeah.
Of course, now I don't have one, but maybe that'll change. I don't know.
Much less. You've climbed down that ladder too.
Yeah, I'm like all the way down to the ground floor. But again, this is where I come back to the idea of what if questions and running experiments so that you can truly learn what makes you happy.
Yeah.
And the things that I enjoy doing, like talking to you guys, writing about personal finance, recording my own podcast, publishing Retire Before Mom and Dad. I play chess, and I'm not afraid to admit it. That's,
we're recording.
At this point, everyone's
you know that we're recording.
I know. Everyone's clicked off now. This guy is weird. It's not, it's just not as expensive as I thought it would be before I knew better.
Yeah. And again, I think that's another perspective thing. I've been I don't even know what the word is, so I'm not even going to try and find it. But an example, my husband and I just went on a vacation to a couple different locations, but one of them was we got to stay on points at a 5-star resort in Las Vegas. We're not gamblers. We didn't even do any of the slot machines, but we enjoyed the pool. But of course, the cabanas by the pool are running like $250 for 4 hours. Ooh. And people are doing it. And it makes it look like it's this super high-end thing. But then you realize it's just a tent in the middle of the desert that somebody has said is worth $250 for 4 hours. And then the ironic thing about that is we then travel, 4 hours to Sedona, Arizona, maybe longer than that. I don't know. Fact check me. And we go to a pool that's completely empty. Beautiful cabanas, more beautiful than the ones at the 5-star resort. Nobody's in it. Nobody's at the pool. It doesn't cost you a thing. It is literally just the monetary value that's placed on something and perspective. And then you don't want it, right? Because it's not valuable anymore, but it's literally the same thing.
They're not charging you enough.
Oh, it's so, right. I'm sorry, that's such a side tangent, but it got me thinking about just the perspective on all of this, of if we could change that and widen and expand our perspective, it can help so much in how we approach money.
The fact that you were like, it's a tent in the desert is why I love you.
It is, right? That's ultimately what it is, that somebody is saying is worth $250 for 4 hours, and people want the status of it, so they do it. They're not getting tan though.
I would pick Sedona over Vegas anyway.
Oh yeah,
just right there.
Absolutely. We flew in because it was cheap and on points, got 2 nights at a 5-star resort, enjoyed the pool, and got out of there.
No cabanas.
No cabana. Just the sun. Anyhow, happiness is not expensive. So, moving on, lie number 4, Rob, you talk about how we can sometimes believe that investing is complicated, and that can be a barrier to us even doing it in the first place. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I tackled this a couple of ways. The first thing that I think causes people to think investing is complicated is all the jargon, right? You're at work and you hear someone say, yeah, I've got an emerging market fund and it's doing really well. Yeah, equities are overpriced, but heck, we're in a bond bubble, and who wants to deal with interest rate risk? And you're like, huh? What just happened? Who is this guy or gal? Right. And the reality is the jargon, the concepts are very simple. You just have to understand the lingo, right? So that's the first thing I tackle in the book is, it's not, you don't have to memorize all this stuff. There's no test at the end of this, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want, you want to understand the basic concepts, right? And then to actually invest, and my approach is, for the most part, low-cost index fund investing, right? I'm a big fan of Vanguard, but other mutual fund companies have great low-cost index funds as well. And you can make it as simple as a single mutual fund, like a target date retirement fund. I do talk about fees. Remember, those small things multiplied over many years make a huge difference. So mutual funds, of course, have fees. And even if the difference seems small, let's say 0.25%, for example, doesn't seem that big a deal, right? You got cashback credit cards that get you 2%. How big a deal can 0.25% be?
Right.
But when you multiply it over decades, it's ginormous, right? But in any event, you can invest with a single fund. They have a thing that's kind of popular called the 3-fund portfolio, where you invest in a U.S. stock index fund and a foreign or international stock index fund, and then a U.S. bond fund. And I give examples of all of these in the book. And you could Google 3-fund portfolio. You'd find a lot of great content on it as well. But very easy to create that kind of portfolio inside your 401k or your IRA. So I that's just not complicated. There are some questions you need to answer, right? Do you start with your 401k at work if you have one? Do you start with an IRA? Should you go with a Roth or traditional? And these are important questions. And I kind of walk through my views on them in the book. Happy to go into any detail now that you want. But at the end of the day, they're not complicated. There's just a couple of things you need to figure out. And you can be investing and you don't need a lot of money. You can put $25 a month in your 401k or start an IRA at a Vanguard or maybe a Betterment or Wealthfront if you want a robo-advisor, for just a few bucks a month.
Yeah.
And it's really that easy. Now, there are some things to think about, right? I mean, the hard part is when the market's down 50% and you're like, who was that guy on their podcast? Berger? Was that his name? What an idiot, right? I started a 3-fund portfolio and I'm down 50%. You need to understand that that's sort of part of the bargain, right? The market was down that much in 08, 09. If you're in your 20s and you live to be 100, you'll experience that kind of market 3, 4, 5 times, right?
Yeah, it's helpful.
So I talk a lot about how to deal with that. Part of that is understanding that it's just part of the cycle of business and economies and the market.
Sure.
But it's tough, right? Because if you think back to 08, 09, it wasn't just that the market was down, right? Everything was failing around. Banks were about to go belly up. Some did. The auto industry was teetering on failure. Unemployment hit at one point, I think 10%. It was scary. People were frightened. People were losing their homes. So you weren't just dealing with a falling market. In some ways, that was just the least of our day-to-day concerns, right? We just wanted to keep our home and have a job. And so that's going to happen again. Maybe not exactly like it did in 08 and 09, and we don't know when. That's the fun part. We have no idea when. Right?
So fun. Mystery.
It's
Super risky.
This is great, Rob. Right. If you can't tell me when, what good is this? Well, the good is that it. You set expectations.
Yeah, you can
it's
anticipate it. Sure. Yeah, plan now for it.
Investing isn't complicated, but there are a few things you need to know and prepare for, and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
just wait for the next market crash.
And I think you covered the most important parts in emphasizing how important it is to just start saving. Like, if you pick a low-cost index fund, I mean, the most important thing is just to start saving consistently. The funds you're in, the company you pick, all that is less important than to actually start doing it. And then you can figure it out along the way. You've got time.
Yeah. And I would add to that, and it kind of dovetails into line number 5, debt is a fact of life. One of the things that I've heard is this idea that you should pay off all your non-mortgage debt before you start investing. And I don't know your views on that, but I can tell you that to me, it's hard for me to think of financial advice that's worse than that. I mean, it's like the worst.
You're making
ever.
all the Ramsey listeners squirm.
Ramsey, I've heard of that guy.
Yeah, who is that?
I mean,
he screams a lot.
I mean, at a high level, I think he's terrific, and I probably agree with 95% of his views. But you've got a 401k at work with matching contribution. You're gonna ignore that for 10 years while you try to get out of student loan debt that's at 5% or 6%. That's just, you might as well take your money and put it in the driveway, pour some gas on it, and set it on fire. That's just
You're sounding extreme too.
I feel like screaming.
Yeah, but I'm not screaming.
Well, this one gets me fired up. I mean, you can pursue multiple financial goals at one time. It's not all or nothing. And there's not an exact science to this. It's not like there's one answer for everybody.
Exactly.
But I think you should be saving and investing something, even while you're trying to meet other financial goals like getting out of debt and buying a home and all that sort of thing.
To look at the rates of interest on what you can be investing versus how much your debt is accruing. It's really important to not just put a one size fits all, and also what you're able to do, what your income is. There's so many variables that need to be considered in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we interviewed our friend Marilee of last year sometime about how she's modifying the Dave Ramsey baby steps, and they're contributing to their 401k. And it has taken them a little longer to pay off the debt. But actually, her and her family, a family of 5, 3 kids, 1 new baby, just became debt-free on a single income. And they still contributed to their 401k for part of that journey. So it can be done, and it's not going to keep you in debt. It's not going to keep you from paying it off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and you raise an important point. I mean, learn from podcasts, learn from things you read, learn from books. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to make what you think is the best decision for you, right? And like as another example, the whole debt snowball versus debt avalanche debate. So I've had people tell me, I really did need the debt snowball approach at first. I really needed to get that first bill paid off. It's a real shot in the arm. But then once I kind of had figured it out, I realized, okay, I got this now.
Yeah.
And then they switched over to debt avalanche because, it's usually faster and cheaper. And I thought that was terrific. I mean, that's a great way to figure out what works best for you.
Agreed. Dave Ramsey was great for my husband and I when we first got married. And once I got the hang of it, I started to realize the freedom that I had and the decisions that I could make that would work for us. So I don't want to knock what he's doing because clearly it's working for so many. But I think that there can come a point where you realize, oh, that was great. That was a tool in my tool belt. And I now am going to use the power drill instead of the screwdriver.
I love that. That's terrific.
And if you need to go back to the manual at some point, like you can flip flop. Like both the debt snowball and the debt avalanche end with you being out of debt. So you don't have to stick with what you start with, and you don't have to, you can go back and forth in whatever season of life you're in.
Absolutely.
You know what else? There's a lot of freedom and greatness too.
Yeah, I never go back and forth on this one. I'm always committed
and it's
to
never,
this one.
This one is gonna stay, and this one is like the power drill. It's the Bill of the Week.
That's right. It's time for the best minute of your entire week. Maybe a baby was born and his name is William. Maybe you paid off your mortgage. Maybe your car died and you're happy to not have to pay that bill anymore. Duck bills, Buffalo Bills, Bill Clinton. This is the Bill of the Week.
Rob, every week we invite our listeners or our guests to share their favorite bill for this week. And you teased us a little with your bill before we started recording. And so I'm so interested to hear what you have for us.
Yeah, so I have a bill that I've been paying for 10 years now, and I have no plans to stop paying it. And it was life-changing.
Wow.
So the story is, in college, I hurt my back playing sports, intramurals. And it progressively got worse, to the point where 2, 3, 4 times a year it'd go out on me and I couldn't walk for a week. And I tried everything. So acupuncture, chiropractor, cupping, dry needling. Oh, that's all kinds of fun.
Ooh, I've never heard of that. What's dry needling?
So think of acupuncture where they just stick the needle into the skin, and then imagine the guy tripping and falling on the needle and driving it into your muscle. Right?
Those are the worst two words that you could ever combine. Dry needling. Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
You tried it though.
So,
oh man.
And I had a physical therapist. One day I went in and he was in a back brace. I'm like, oh, this is not good. I can't lose you. He'd been in a car accident. And I said, well, what does the physical therapist do who's got a back problem? Because, I'm suffering here. And he sent me to a private gym here in Northern Virginia, Underground Athlete. And I say private, it's not the kind of gym where you just show up whenever you want and use the equipment. They map out a workout plan every month. You make appointments and you go in, and it's a small group setting with trainers, right? Mm-hmm. And I started doing that 10 years ago, and I was a mess. So there's guys in there bench pressing and squatting, and I'm literally laying on the floor with no weights. And he was having me go from my back to my stomach without using my arms or legs. That was me. Well, I'm not kidding. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I like that workout.
It was while I'm trying, the other guys are like tripping over me, like, what's this clown doing?
I'm trying to imagine how you would go from your back to your stomach without your arms or your legs. I'm going to have to try that later.
You engage your core.
My son can show you. Yeah, my 4-month-old.
You engage your core. That's what you do. So, 10 years and I haven't had my back go out on me. Now, It was slow. It took me forever to get to where I am. I mean, I weighed probably 2.25 then. I weigh 180 now, so that's part of it. But it's not cheap. And I gladly pay his fee every single month.
I love paying my CrossFit membership. So I love hearing other people that will pay money to invest in their health like that.
And that's the point.
I love that one.
So you do CrossFit?
I do. I'm not good at it. I'm not what you think that saying that should make me. I'm very bad at it. But
so the thing with CrossFit is they do those Olympic style lifts, right? If you know what I mean. And for me, those would be probably dangerous because of lack of mobility.
Yeah.
I would probably end up hurting myself.
Sometimes they're dangerous for me too, but I don't lift very heavy weight. So they're not that bad. But I love that. I love that bill.
Thanks for sharing that bill.
Yeah, there's my bill. There you go.
Yes. Okay. If you're out there and you want to submit your bill of the week, if it's a gym membership of some sort or any membership, please visit frugalfriendspodcast.com/bill and let us know on our Google voicemail or SpeakPipe. We'd love to hear it and be proud of you.
From the studio who brought you the #1 podcast, The Piketon Massacre, this is Murder 101.
A group of high school students started a project to research a string of unsolved murders.
Those murders happened in the mid-1980s.
He's out there doing stuff. He just didn't stop.
Everything that the students predicted through their profile turned out to be accurate.
Redhead killer profile. Male, Caucasian, 5'9" to 6'2", 180 to 270 pounds. Unstable home, absent father and a domineering mother. Right-handed, IQ above 100, most likely heterosexual.
There is no profile of this killer except for the ones the students created.
Just because some of these women no longer have people to speak for them does not mean that they deserve to not be spoken for.
What if this guy's still alive? Like, what if he comes after us?
I said, are you going to kill me? And he said, yes.
Listen to Murder 101 on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Discover the heartwarming and hilarious world of sibling connections on Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson.
You might be asking yourself, what is sibling revelry?
Yeah, well, we just made it up.
They'll have some laughs and maybe inspire some people along the way with universal tales of what it's like to grow up with brothers and sisters.
We're full-blood siblings, the only full-blood sibling.
In our family. Well, not in the world. I mean...
No, in the whole world. That's just it. Like, no one...
Dive into family tales and explore the human mind with guests like Joel and Benji Madden.
And it's fun because we've decided to open it up, you know, to really like all kinds of different siblings. And it's going to be an awesome season.
It's more than a podcast. It's a celebration of the ties that bind us. Listen to Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good work. And now that leads us to the lightning round.
Pew, pew,
I'm a little sick. I don't know how that turned out, but...
You guys seem to do that the same way every single time. How do you do that?
Do I think it's that I'm getting better.
I don't know. It's impressive.
Everybody wants to hear the actual like lightning sounds, and so that's what I've decided I'm going to provide.
Eric keeps us on our toes. Sometimes he adds in actual lightning sounds that probably scares people so much.
I don't know. I'm here for the people.
My
the lightning.
friend Emerald said that she was falling asleep to our podcast. Well, it was endearing. Now that I say it out loud, it sounds like an insult. Cool. She said that she thought my voice was soothing and she was like falling asleep to it. But then we got to the bill of the week, which is super loud. It scared her out of her sleep. So sorry, y'all. Don't fall asleep on our podcast.
Well, that's how we assure people listen to the second half of the podcast.
Well, at least we haven't fallen asleep. So we got that going for us.
We're all awake now.
Yeah.
So in this lightning round, that's just really name only, Rob. Let's be real. Here's our question.
Okay.
What's the first step to reshaping how we can think about financial freedom?
The first step, the very first thing I would do if you haven't started anywhere, is prepare a balance sheet, your net worth statement. That's the first thing I would do. In other words, a list of everything you own and all of the debt you owe, and then what the difference is. And if you're like me, when I did that, I had a negative net worth. It was not pretty. That's okay. Mm-hmm. That is the first thing I would do. Mm-hmm. And I would track it religiously. And it can be, you can update it once a year. It doesn't have to be every month or anything. Because ultimately, your wealth is not how much you make, right? A lot of people make a ton of money and spend it all. By the way, I worked with a lot of them at the law firm, and they wouldn't know financial freedom if it came up and punched them in the nose. So, your income is what you make, but what shows up on your balance sheet, your net worth statement, is what you've ended up keeping and investing. So that actually is the first thing I would do, is prepare a net worth statement. It could just be in a spreadsheet, piece of paper, nothing fancy. That's how you measure your progress. And I would update it, once a year. That's the first thing I would do.
Awesome. Yeah. And you could use personal capital is how we keep track of our net worth too. That's super easy.
I love personal capital. I use it as well. And it can absolutely track your net worth.
Yeah. Pretty graphs and charts. All right. And Rob, so where can people go to learn more about you and get your book?
So they can just go to retirebeforemomandDad.com. That's where they'll find me and the book. I mean, I'm a deputy editor at Forbes, so you could look me up there as well.
Retire Before Mom and Dad is the book. retirebeforemomandDad.com is the website. And go check it out and retire before your mom and your dad. Well, thank you so much for coming, Rob. This was so much fun.
Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Super good input. Thanks for being here. Wow. Our interviews are my favorite, I think. That's my favorite part.
Yes.
I don't know what everybody else's favorite part is. You can let us know in Facebook, not on our reviews. Or in the reviews, yeah. You can talk about your favorites, not your least favorite. Yeah, if it's positive. Yeah. Because that stuff goes everywhere, okay? The internet, you can't erase that. So anyhow, we are continuing on with our book club. And this month, we are reading your very own. You just heard him. It's Rob's book, Retire Before Mom and Dad. So hop in on that bandwagon.
And if you would like to win a copy of Rob's book, all you need to do to enter is to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher, screenshot the review, and send it to frugalfriendspodcast@gmail.com. And we will select one winner for every 5 reviews we get at the end of the month.
Nice. And if you want an example of some really helpful review literature, we've got some fantastic writers out there on the internet just typing away. This one's from Andrea, and she gives us 5 stars because it pairs well with the literary content. And she says, realistic personal finance. Thank you so much, Jen and Jill, for your energy and enthusiasm for personal finance. You have been inspirational as I work to dig out of student loan debt, along with focusing on spending money more wisely. Whoops. On experiences that truly serve me. I appreciate your realistic approach in both the small and drastic ways that you suggest to help manage money and time. Boom, Andrea. You used all of the words in the best way possible. And I hope that that's a lesson to everybody else. Leave us a review.
Yes. Thank you so much, Andrea. Yeah. And maybe we'll read it on air at the end of the episode.
Anyhow, see you next week.
Next week. Yeah, that's it. Bye.
Frugal Friends is produced, edited, and mixed by Eric Sirianni.
Okay, bye. See ya. Don't let the door hit you, apparently. Oh, man, Jen, I was dying. We didn't do Google Hangouts this time to see each other's faces. But when you were talking about how when you say CrossFit, but then you felt the need to describe that you don't look like the person that would say, or I don't even know how you said it. I could not contain myself. Like, But before you get a mental picture,
and you're like, she doesn't do that. She doesn't even do yoga.
I would never doubt that you do CrossFit, but I was dying at all the caveats you felt you needed to state. Oh my goodness.
Well, if you watched me do CrossFit, you would understand.
Can someone
what I'm
take
saying,
a video?
If you actually watched me do it.
Do any of our listeners go to the gym with you? Because I would pay them real money to get a video of you and post it.
I don't know. They know what I do for a living, but I don't know if they know like what I do for a living. You know?
I don't even understand that. But what I'm saying is if anybody in the St. Pete area is listening to this and they can just hang out at CrossFit Gym for the next week and snag some vid of Jen, I'd be so appreciative.
There's only one person that might hear this. Yeah, that might do that.
Would Lisa do it?
I don't know. She's
Travis.
I don't know.
Travis. I'm looking at you, dude. You know he's going to do that for some cash.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. He may or may not. Anyways, that's all for me.
Okay.
That's all for me.
Bye.
A group of high school students started a project to research a string of unsolved murders.
There is no profile of this killer except for the ones the students created.
What if this guy's still alive? Like, what if he comes after us?
Once you start getting a few tips or a few leads or a few identifications, then the cold case isn't so cold anymore.
This is Murder 101. Listen to Murder 101 on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Discover the heartwarming and hilarious world of sibling connections on Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson. Dive into family tales, explore the human mind, and laugh with guests like Joel and Benji Madden. It's more than a podcast, it's a celebration of the ties that bind us.
And it's fun because we've decided to open it up to really like all kinds of different siblings. And it's going to be an awesome season.
Listen to Sibling Revelry with Kate Hudson and Oliver Hudson on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.